Right on cue. Hello and welcome, everybody. Man, it is good to see more people than seats in a room of Liberals here in Nova Scotia. Look, I can tell you it's a great pleasure to be here. Bonjour et bienvenue tout le monde. C'est un plaisir d'être ici sur une location historique dans l'histoire de notre pays. Pier 21 obviously plays an extraordinary role in this country's history, being the place where so many Canadians and their families were first welcomed to Canada. And it's wonderful to be able to gather for such an important event at a location with such history behind it. Look, I've got an incredible honor this morning of introducing you to a friend and someone I'm supporting in the upcoming leadership race, but I thought I'd offer just a few short reflections before I do. This is an exciting time to be a Liberal. The conversations I've been having over the last couple of weeks in particular have been filled with a level of energy and enthusiasm that I frankly haven't seen over the last couple of years. People in our community are talking with a real energy behind the next campaign, and it's because they found a candidate that they're pretty excited to support. I can tell you the conversations over the last few years in our community have been filled with some real frustrations that people have had. Frustrations with the cost of living, frustrations about whether their voices were in fact being heard to the degree they wanted to from the federal government and governments across different levels. But I can tell you one thing that people have said resolutely and repeatedly to me is they do want change, but they're not interested in the kind of change that Pierre Poilievre is representing. I can tell you we have an opportunity to present a kind of change that is more focused on the economy, more focused on the cost of living for ordinary working people who live in our communities here in Nova Scotia and across country, without compromising the commitment that our supporters want us to maintain to important social values like protecting the environment, making sure working class people get a fair shake. Well, when I started thinking about who I was going to support in this upcoming leadership contest, I came to the conclusion very quickly that it was going to be Mark Carney. When I talk to the people in my community, I feel I have a duty to reflect their feedback in the decisions that I make as an elected official and a member of the Liberal Party. And they tell me that they want change, but they want to focus on the economy. They want change, but they want us to continue support for initiatives that are going to protect our environment, but in a way that works for their households. Folks, we literally have a person who's put his hand up, who cares deeply about this country, who is renowned globally for his expertise in all things economy and his ability to mirror the important objectives of growing the economy with protecting our environment. These are the reasons that I'm supporting Mark Carney to become the next leader of the Liberal Party of Canada and indeed our country's next Prime Minister. I can tell you through my conversations I have had with Mark over the last number of months, he's deeply committed to this country and importantly to the people who call it home. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my honour and privilege to introduce you to the next leader of the Liberal Party and Prime Minister of Canada, Mr. Mark Carney.
Thank you. We always, there's not a Liberal, and bonjour tout le monde, hello everyone. Thank you, Sean, for that very generous introduction. Thank you all for being here. Thank you for your commitment. Merci pour ton appui, ton engagement pour notre pays, pour notre parti. You always have to adjust these after. There's not a Liberal who doesn't have to adjust the microphone after Sean Fraser has spoken. Kwe. Bonjour tout le monde. Kwe. I'd like to acknowledge that we are gathered here on the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. The people of the Mi'kmaq Nation have lived on this territory for millennia, and we acknowledge them as the past, present, and future caretakers of this land. You know, it is a pleasure to be here in Halifax. Again, Sean, thank you for being here. It's great to see so many familiar faces from here and from across the country, and particularly to be up here on the stage with Darren, Cody, Jaime, and Mike. This is a great Liberal team in Nova Scotia, and we are going to move forward for this country, and we are going to win this election and make this country much stronger. And one of the reasons why we have to win this election, I'm going to start by saying a few words about what's happening with our neighbors down south. President Trump's tariffs on Canada could be imposed as early as tomorrow. And I've been in regular contact with our ministers who are down there, meeting with their counterparts, including Foreign Affairs Minister Joly, Finance Minister LeBlanc, Minister McGuinty. I just want to be absolutely clear that I and my fellow Liberals stand foursquare behind their efforts. President Trump thinks Canada will cave in. We will never, ever bow down to a bully. Canadians will always stick together. And we won't stand by as tariffs hurt our workers and their families. Canadians need to remain united. Now, let me be clear. This situation, unfortunately, could not be more serious. And at times like these, we need serious leadership and a serious plan. I'm ready to stand up for Canada. Who's with me? Tout début, je voulais prendre le temps de répondre à ce qui se passe au sud de la frontière. Le président Trump pourrait imposer des tarifs aussitôt que demain. J'ai été en contact avec la ministre des Affaires étrangères, Mélanie Joly, et j'appuie ses efforts ainsi que les efforts du ministre des Finances, Dominique Leblanc, pour défendre notre pays, le Canada. Le président Trump veut qu'on perde notre sang-froid et qu'on abandonne. Nous ne resterons pas les bras croisés alors qu'il menace nos travailleurs et leurs familles. Ça ne pourrait pas être plus sérieux. Et dans des situations de crise, nous avons besoin de leadership sérieux et d'un plan sérieux. Je suis prêt à me tenir debout devant Trump et à défendre notre pays. Now, well, President Trump and some Americans may be turning back the clock on climate action. As Sean Fraser just indicated, we're picking up the pace. We're here today to address, in effect, three major issues that are wrapped into one big one. First, how to help hardworking families to finally get ahead. Secondly, how to boost the competitiveness of Canadian companies. And thirdly, how to build the strongest economy in the G7. All of these issues, each of these issues, is affected by how we as Canadians play our part in addressing climate change. Now, before I go into our plan, I want to say a few words about myself. I'm not a politician. I'm becoming a politician, but I'm not a politician. And so slogans, slander, and sound bites don't come easily to me. And because I'm not a politician, I don't like press releases that are dressed up as policies. So if I see a politically expedient but half-baked solution, I'll reject it. What I am is a pragmatist. So if I see that something isn't working, I'm going to change it. And today is about change, but it's not about cosmetic change. It's about the right change that puts money in people's pockets. It's about change that makes our companies more competitive. It's about change that builds the strongest economy in the G7. Now, when Pierre Poilievre says we have to choose between fighting climate change and growing our economy, he's lying to us. Mais Pierre Poilievre nous dit qu'on doit choisir entre lutter contre les changements climatiques ou bâtir notre économie. Et la vérité, c'est qu'il nous ment. Canadians have had more than enough of such division and confusion. With Canada now under attack, It is time to come together. And since Canada's current climate policy has become too divisive, it's time for a new, more effective climate plan that everyone can get behind. It's a plan that makes our economy more competitive, it grows good jobs today, and it will grow better ones in the future. You know, friends, there are literally billions of dollars of investment on the table and millions of jobs at stake. So here's how our new plan works. My government will immediately remove the consumer carbon tax. But we won't stop there. Instead, what we'll do is create a system of incentives to reward Canadians for making greener choices. So it means that you'll no longer have to pay more to fuel your car or heat your home. But when you choose an energy-efficient appliance or an electric car or home insulation, you will be rewarded, and we will get the big polluters to pay for it. En tant que chef, je vais annuler la taxe sur le carbone et, à la place, créer un système d'incitatif pour récompenser les Canadiens et Canadiennes qui font des choix éco-responsables. Vous n'allez plus devoir payer plus pour faire le plein ou pour chauffer votre maison. En choisissant d'acheter un électro qui consomme moins, un véhicule électrique ou mieux isoler une maison, vous serez récompensé. Et nous allons faire payer les grands pollueurs. Now, let me be clear. If we were only to remove the carbon tax, we'd create two problems. First, Canada's emissions would not decrease as rapidly as before. And secondly, most Canadian households would be worse off because of the end of the rebate. Pierre Poilievre's, with his simplistic and misleading axe the tax, doesn't care about either problem. Now, that's possible because he doesn't really believe in climate change. Or it's possible he thinks that Canada, for the first time in our history, should be a free rider on a massive global problem, leaving for other countries to solve. It's certainly clear that he doesn't really understand how important that money in the rebate is to hardworking families across the country. But we get it. We care. And that's why our plan will directly solve both problems by both implementing new climate policies that are at least as effective in lowering emissions and by bringing forward new economic measures that will make Canadian families better off. So how does it work? First, as I mentioned, to help Canadians invest in greener policies, we'll have the big polluters pay for climate incentives by developing and integrating a new consumer carbon credit market into the industrial pricing system. That way we ensure that taxpayers aren't on the hook for consumer climate incentives, while we still provide price certainty for households when they make climate-smart choices. The second thing we'll do is, with a new Made in Canada competitiveness strategy, my government will improve and tighten the output-based pricing system for large companies. We'll extend it to 2035, and we will speed up approvals of clean energy projects. That's okay. Thirdly, it's important. It is actually important. See, Cody knows just how important that last bit of that phrase is, because we got to get moving. Third thing we're going to do is to ensure that there's fair competition for our companies and that we penalize high-polluting foreign imports. So we're going to develop a carbon border adjustment mechanism. What that does is promote jobs here at home, it prevents carbon leakage abroad, and it aligns Canada with our allies who are still engaged in the fight against climate change. Pour que nos entreprises puissent mieux concurrencer et que les importations polluantes paient le juste part, on va mettre en place un mécanisme d'ajustement carbone aux frontières. Ça va protéger nos emplois, éviter la pollution se déplace ailleurs et nous aligner avec nos alliés dans la lutte contre les changements climatiques. The fourth thing we will do is to build Canada's competitiveness. And we'll do so by boosting investments where they're needed the most. My government will provide greater investment tax credits, more Canada Growth Fund initiatives, and major provisions for accelerated depreciation of private investments. And these will all reinforce the incentives created by those changes to the output-based pricing system. What's the bottom line? Canada can become a clean energy superpower and make the most of our existing oil and gas resources during the transition. And there's more. We now have an opportunity to leapfrog the United States while they turn inward and attempt to turn back the clock. Pour attirer les investissements là où on a le plus besoin, mon gouvernement va bonifier des crédits d'impôt à l'investissement, élargir les initiatives de fonds de croissance du Canada et accélérer l'amortissement des investissements privés. Ça va renforcer les incitatifs créés par notre réforme du système de tarification. Le Canada a tout pour devenir une superpuissance en énergie propre, tout en maximisant nos ressources énergétiques pendant la transition. Et on peut même dépasser les États-Unis pendant qu'ils se replient sur eux-mêmes en regardant en arrière. And lastly, to finance these good Canadian jobs and great economic growth, our government will move quickly to finalize and implement the Made in Canada Sustainable Investment Guidelines. We'll implement a taxonomy for every priority sector and mandate broad coverage of climate risk disclosure. And this is the key point, and I want to be absolutely clear. We will do all of this while remaining laser-focused on lowering costs for Canadian households. So we will be making big economic changes to ensure those households are immediately better off, and I very much look forward to sharing those plans with you in the days to come. Nous allons apporter des grands changements économiques pour améliorer immédiatement la solution ces ménages canadiens. Et j'ai hâte de vous présenter ces plans dans les semaines à venir. Now, let me finish. Eventually, the fever that has gripped our neighbor to the south, eventually that will pass. But while that fever rages, we will remain, as Canadians, we will remain resolute and we will remain true to our values. And those values include solidarity with one another and sustainability for our children and grandchildren's futures. So that's why the measures I'm announcing today will reduce emissions faster than before. They'll help create Canadian jobs. They'll build the competitiveness of our major companies and begin to realize Canada's immense potential to be a global leader in a clean economy. By working together, we will build that strongest economy in the G7, regardless of what happens south of the border. And we will do so for all Canadians across every generation. Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much. And quoi? On va commencer avec des questions? Oui. Okay. So thank you, and I'll now be pleased to take questions.
Thank you, Mr.
Je suis
Carney.
prêt de répondre à votre question.
Thank you, Mr. Carney. We're going to start with the question period. We'll do one question, one follow-up. On va commencer avec la période de questions. Une question de suivi. S'il vous plaît, vous identifiez et nommez votre média. Please identify yourself and name your media. Go ahead.
Hi, Chris Lambie, National Post. You say you'll drop the consumer carbon tax, but will you maintain the federal industrial carbon tax? And if so, are you maintaining the current government levels and increases?
Thank you for the question. It's an important point. Yes, we are maintaining what's called the output-based pricing system, which is the price that large polluters will pay. The important, and there is an expectation, as you know, that price will rise over the course of this decade. What that does is it provides a very clear signal to large companies to make the investments now, to get their emissions down, to become more competitive. What is innovative, one of the things that is innovative about what we're doing, is we in effect will provide them with more options to reduce emissions because they will be able to pay for the emission reductions of Canadian households. To be absolutely clear, you're sitting here in Halifax and you're trying to make a decision about buying an EV or a heat pump or home insulation or a better appliance, you'll see a clear fixed level of credit that you're going to get. But we as the federal government will turn around and monetize that from the large polluters. And that way, the taxpayer's not on the dime. The large companies have more options. The system's more efficient. We move forward together. Thank you.
Can I, one follow-up? Will you be running in the Halifax by-election for the seat vacated by Andy Fillmore? And if not, where will you be running?
There are some excellent candidates for that vacancy, and I'm sure the local riding association will make the right decision for that. I'll say as well that one of the things, and it was referenced in the introduction, we are seeing a huge surge in interest in not just rejoining the party. We've had a huge increase in membership of the Liberal Party, but also in candidates, new candidates putting themselves forward, other candidates who had been thinking about maybe stepping away, remaining. That means that the number of ridings in which I can potentially run is diminishing, but I will be making, that's a good thing. By the way, I'll be making a decision in due course, and I look forward to putting myself forward for a riding. Yeah.
Thanks.
Next question.
Hello, Sky Brida Blom with Global News. And I'm just wondering, I know you've announced larger scale plans, but for the Atlantic region specifically, what's on your radar?
What's on the radar? Well, I think the first thing is on the radar. Let me say a couple of things. One of the points that has really impressed me over the course of the last few weeks, and it really has only been a few weeks, is conversations with the gentlemen that are to my left. Some of them went back further when Sean Fraser, obviously as a minister, but the conversations with the deputies in Nova Scotia, the men and women who are serving here across Atlantic Canada, and really getting a sense of their priorities, the priorities of the people they're serving. So one of the things that helped inform today's announcement, candidly, is those discussions, what's happening on the ground, how we can make it more effective. Second thing that's absolutely clear, it's a big issue across Atlantic Canada. Well, it's a big issue in the major centres, particularly in Atlantic Canada, is around housing, and how do we reinforce that? We'll be saying more about that. I'll say a third thing, and I'll stop on this, which is perhaps more unique to this region, which is how do we get the Department of Fisheries and Oceans to be more effective for the region, closer to the region. And there are some very good ideas about how to do that. We want to work that through because, let's face it, you know it, these people know it, you know it. Canada's a big country. And coast to coast to coast means different things for policies, and being close to the fishers is incredibly important. And I think we'll come up for a solution that works both for Atlantic Canada and the other coasts as well.
And just following up, I also had a question about a colleague as well has dropped out of the leadership race to back you and is from this region. What does that mean to you?
It means a tremendous amount. I'd say the first thing, immense respect for Jaime and him stepping up in the leadership race and profiling the crucial issues around reconciliation. There are many issues with respect to that. That is unfinished work. The country has made progress, and I salute the current government for making it a priority. It will be a priority for me as well, and we focused on specific aspects that we can move forward. Economic reconciliation is a very large part of it, but there is much more than that. And I'm very pleased that Jaime is part of our team and that we'll all be working going forward. Thank you.
Next question, Bloomberg, or Globe and Mail.
Hi, Mr. Carney. My name's Lindsay Jones. I'm with the Globe and Mail. And my question is, in the past, you've supported the carbon tax and defended Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's stance on the carbon tax. Why now? Why are you, coming out with this now?
Well, I think there's two things, Lindsay. One is that, and that's right, and it's worked. It has had some impact in terms of reducing our emissions, making things more efficient. But as I said in my remarks, and I think certainly colleagues would know and people would know, it has become very divisive for Canadians. It's the perceptions of the impact, the negative impacts of the carbon tax on households without fully recognizing the positive impacts of the rebate has made this more of a divisive issue. It's been fed by misinformation and lies, quite frankly, by the Leader of the Opposition, but okay. We are in this situation. And it's important that climate policy has broad buy-in. There's a better way to do things. We've worked on coming up with a better way to do things, which keeps an element of the price on pollution, the most important element, which is the industrial price. And I'll just point out for those who may be interested, that really what we're looking at is almost 90% of the emissions reductions are coming from the industrial side. So a little more than, it depends on the year, but somewhere around 10, 11% coming from households. So we've worked a way where we're going to get greater reductions on the industrial side, some household reductions driven by incentives, the carrot, not the stick, and have those industrial users pay for them. So this is a better, in the end, it's a better solution that builds off of what was there before.
Okay, and in relation to what's happening in the U.S., what are you proposing Canada can do about the tariffs that you say maybe, we all know may be coming into effect tomorrow?
So the first thing is to say, and as I alluded to at the start of my remarks, is we have a government in place. We have negotiators literally at the front line with the Foreign Affairs Minister, the Minister of Finance, Minister of Public Safety are in Washington having discussions with their American counterparts and stand foursquare behind them. Second is that, so I'm not going to say anything that undercuts or front runs or interferes with that. But to be clear, we have many cards. We're keeping all our cards. We're not turning over any of our cards face up. First and foremost, what you need to do in any negotiation is strengthen your outside option. And our outside option is to walk away. Our outside option is to strengthen our economy now. This is one of many measures we have to strengthen the economy in the near term and over the medium term, and we will take those. We clearly have signaled, and there should be no doubt for anyone in the United States, that we will impose retaliatory dollar-for-dollar tariffs if these measures are put in place. We will target those tariffs where they have maximum impact in the United States and minimum impact in Canada. We will support our companies and workers that are most affected. We'll recycle the money from those tariffs to support them. There's much more we can do, and I'll just add this to it, which is consistent with other public comments, is that we have an opportunity to reinforce the strength of our economy. We have an opportunity to make our economy work better as one economy, and we have an opportunity, as I said in my remarks, candidly, to take advantage of what's happening in the United States. They're taking their eye off the ball on some big issues that are going to be fundamental not just to the future of our planet, but to the competitiveness of companies. So let's take advantage of that and move forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Next question, CTV.
Hi, Mr. Carney. Callum Smith with CTV. I guess I just wonder why you're releasing this level of platform detail here in Atlantic Canada, and how important is this region for you, first as a leadership candidate, and secondly to the Liberal Party as a whole?
Well, first to say, let's start with the second part. Incredibly important to the Liberal Party, to the country as a whole. So many of the best ideas, energy, for the party, for the country, have come from Atlantic Canada, have come from Nova Scotia. As I said earlier, just in an earlier response, part of the benefit of discussing and listening to MPs, listening to their ideas over the course of the last few weeks has been to inform policy. Now, I'm not one to hold something back and wait to release a policy. We need to get moving, right? We're for a variety of reasons. It's not just about campaigning, but it is not an overstatement to say that we're in a crisis caused by the actions of the President, reinforcing real pain that Canadian households have felt. And we're about solutions, and we're going to put those solutions out in front of Canadians and look for their confidence so we can put them into place. That's what's at stake. Let's take this issue here today on climate change. Pierre Poilievre, as you've heard thousands and thousands of times, would axe the tax. That's it. That's all he cares about. That's it. Doesn't care about households being worse off. Doesn't care about our companies being less competitive. Doesn't care about the future of the economy. Certainly doesn't care about the planet. We care about all those things. And we're dealing with all those things, starting first and foremost with those households and getting their costs down. But we're able to do more than one thing at one time, and that's why this is so important.
Speaking of household costs, I guess I just wonder, can you detail these carbon credits a bit more? You talk about greener choices being rewarded. What do you mean by that, and how will that differ from, say, the carbon tax rebate?
Yeah, that's a great question. So what we will roll out once in government is the specific credit levels for EV purchases, appliance purchases, whether it's heat pump, home insulation. So households are looking at fixed level dollar levels of rebates that they will get for taking those steps. And I should add, maybe just for the avoidance of doubt, I didn't mention this, but the way the system works, it's large companies that are affected by the output-based pricing system. So small and medium-sized companies that have relatively low carbon footprints, this also affects them. The carbon tax comes off them as well. Then they get a choice, and we'll design the incentive system for them. They get a choice whether to reduce emissions and also benefit from these types of credits. So we'll show those specific amounts to households for the various actions, small businesses. And then we as a government will take the emission reductions, those credits, and we will let them be sold into the output-based pricing system market, which has a credit system. And that's how the large producers pay for it. We can structure this so that there's no cost to the taxpayer, or recycle some of that money back into other climate action.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Next question, APTN.
Hello, hi, my name is Angel Moore and I'm with APTN National News. Last week, the 13 Nova Scotia chiefs rejected to be part of a $250 million program with the Department of Fisheries. They're saying that our treaties are not for sale and they are united and they want to manage their own fishery. And they're frustrated because they say that negotiations should be nation to nation because of the treaties, not with DFO officials. So if you become Prime Minister, would you support the nations of Atlantic Canada, the Mi'kmaq, the Wolastoqey, the Passamaquoddy, managing their own fisheries as the treaties state?
Yeah, several items here, and in part, and in the element of your question, reinforces one aspect. It's not all about DFO, just to be clear, but one aspect of DFO and being closer to the situation
on the coast. I was going to say on the ground, but on the coast and in the oceans. That's there. First point. Second point, absolutely, we have a responsibility as government. My government will certainly fulfill our constitutional responsibilities and respect those rights. We want to have a viable fishery that works for First Nations, works for all residents and fishers in Atlantic Canada. Thank you.
Thank you. Through the campaigning, we've been noticing that reconciliation and Indigenous peoples haven't really been mentioned much. You did comment earlier today. If you became Prime Minister, how would you approach reconciliation different from Trudeau?
Well, I think the first thing to say is that I think it's important to recognize, reconciliation is a process. It is not a process without end. It should not be a process without end. And it's important to recognize where there has been progress with respect to reconciliation. And it has been a priority of the government since 2015. There has been progress. There's more work to do. But in order for this to be effective and really move forward, and I just want to underscore that it has been a priority. We have made progress. There is more to do, first point. Second point, there are a series of issues, for example, around child services and devolution there and support accordingly, where we have major unfinished business as the federal government with First Nations on that, failed negotiations, as I'm sure you're aware, and Jaime and I have had a number of discussions around that. That's a priority. The second thing, or the third thing, and I'll finish on this if I may, which is as a country, we're in a position where, yes, we have big challenges, but we have these enormous opportunities to build infrastructure, build housing, as Sean and his team have put out strategies there, build a clean energy infrastructure, and build beyond. So much of that will happen in partnership with First Nations. So the economic reconciliation aspect, really putting not just words into action, but into projects consistent with UNDRIP and our responsibility. That is a huge element of of our initiatives, and I think it's going to be a very exciting time to move forward on reconciliation going forward. Thank you.
Merci. Thank you. We'll have time for two more questions. Deux dernières questions, une en français, Radio-Canada.
Bonjour, mon nom est Agathe Boucard, je travaille pour Radio-Canada. Vous promettez d'abolir la taxe carbone, mais allez-vous garder le plafonnement des émissions des secteurs gaziers et pétroliers?
Deuxième partie, je vais garder quoi?
Oui, est-ce que vous allez garder les plafonnements des émissions des secteurs gaziers et pétroliers?
Oui. En bref, oui. On va garder, on va renforcer en même temps les incitatifs afin des grands investissements, par exemple comme Pathways, les réductions de carbone en place. On va renforcer ces incitatifs en même temps afin d'améliorer, afin d'atteindre le plafond.
Merci.
Prochaine question, last question, dernière question.
Luke Ettinger with CBC News. You say you want to leapfrog the United States and create alliances with other nations fighting climate change. Who specifically would you align with, and what would that look like?
Well, I think the first thing to say is that, and I have direct personal experience with this, that virtually every nation at present is taking it more seriously than the new U.S. administration. Virtually every nation. And one way I can demonstrate that in concrete terms is if you look at the investment in energy, power, over the course of the last year, over 90% of it was in clean energy. Now, why is it in clean energy? It's partly for for domestic pollution reasons. It's largely because increasingly it's the lowest marginal cost source of energy. It's also because big manufacturers don't want to have a carbon footprint from their energy sources as they change where they invest around the world. So, and the leaders with respect to the scale of the shift, obviously it would include the European Union, it would include the United Kingdom, it would include a number of major economies in Asia that are fast-growing economies. Now, we have broader issues with some of those economies that we need to resolve, and we'll be resolute in coming to a conclusion on those. But it is a very large footprint of the world that is like that, and a consequence of that. You see, one of the things we have to do as a government, certainly we have to do as a country, is we have to manage the present. We need to focus with respect to climate change on what's happening to people's everyday costs and earn the right to win the future. That's what this plan is putting in place. Right? It's recognizing the impact on households, making them better off, giving them incentives to move, and at the same time, we're able to do more than one thing. We're able to realize that the world is shifting where one of the biggest determinants of competitiveness in any industry is going to be what your carbon footprint is. And we can own this. We can absolutely own this as Canada. This is our moment. This is our time. We're going to leapfrog the United States while they've turned inwards and trying to turn back the clock. They'll come around eventually. And when they come around, we're going to be ahead of them.
On making
you.
big
Sorry, this is
polluters
what
pay,
puts
how are
an
you
end-
going to ensure
Sorry.
that those big polluters don't pass on the cost to hardworking Canadians, as you say?
Well, you've got to look at what the big polluters are producing versus where that's consumed. So I'm Dofasco, I'm a steel company. I'm not passing on my costs down through to the level of the consumption product. Let me give you another example. When you look at the final value add, for example, I'm going to pick our steel companies again. In terms of the final value add impact of changes, we're talking in the tens of dollars into autos. So there's ways that that ensures that it doesn't come back down, in part because the nature of the polluters are there, and the fact that we integrate this with a carbon border adjustment mechanism. And in the end, what we're going to see is much bigger incentives for households, a more choice, and this is a crucial point, and I'll maybe end with this if I could, more choice for those large companies on how they get emissions down, okay? So they have the options immediately of reducing their emissions or working to reduce their emissions, but they also can pay Canadians to reduce our emissions. In both cases, our emissions come down. And it's a much more efficient system in order to do it. It will have a big impact, and it's going to ensure that taxpayers' money, that precious resource that we can devote as a government to other priorities of Canadians, keeping their taxes down and ensuring that we continue to pay for crucial social services from health care at the provincial level to child care, dental care, old age pension, and beyond. Great.
Thank you. This
Merci
is what puts an
beaucoup.
end to our
Thank you.
press conference.